Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for coming. What a great crowd. We are really excited to have you here this afternoon to the launch of BuildingIN. We're starting right at 1. It's a hybrid event, so we have people joining us online as well. So thank you to the people that are Zooming in with us, and to everyone here. I do just want to start by acknowledging, of course, that we're here today on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe. And this is especially relevant given that we're here today to talk about housing and land use, because we do know that across this country, Indigenous people are disproportionately without housing, and that needs to be considered, of course, in everything that we do. So joining me here today is we have Steve Pomeroy from Focus Consulting, and we have Rosalind J. Hill of RJ Hill Architecture and Planning, and Rosalind will be providing an overview of the BuildingIN program in a few minutes. So why BuildingIN? Well, we can build more housing in cities in 3 ways. We can build up mid to high-rise apartments, towers, which we should do in dense urban environments and in proximity to rapid transit. But this only serves about 15% of housing need. We can build out low-rise housing into greenfields and new subdivisions, but that's just not a sustainable way from either a fiscal or environmental perspective. Or we can build in with low-rise, multi-unit housing into existing neighborhoods at a scale that will ensure that cities are able to meet their housing targets. So, build in. Why does BuildingIN work? So we know 4 things for sure. We know that cities are in a housing crisis. We're in a climate emergency. Cities are struggling financially, and most people want to live in low-rise housing. And BuildingIN addresses all of these. This program will add more well-designed multi-unit housing into existing low-rise neighborhoods. It will allow municipalities to plan strategically to get more housing built to meet their housing targets with certainty. And more on that in a little bit. And when cities make choices about housing, they're also making choices about how they tackle their climate plans. We know that 70% of global emissions come from cities, mostly due to building design and transportation choices. And BuildingIN tackles this with better built homes in walkable and transit-served neighborhoods. And when cities make choices about housing, they're also making choices about fiscal sustainability. Cities are strapped for cash. I can attest to that. They receive about 11 cents from each dollar of taxes collected, and yet they're responsible for about 15% of all expenditures. Continuing to pay to service new neighborhoods further and further away from their core is just simply not sustainable. BuildingIN will help municipalities plan for growth in a way that is fiscally sustainable by simulating future revenues and upgrade costs so that they can plan for new housing in existing neighborhoods. And 85% of people choose to live in low-rise neighborhoods, but cities have traditionally planned for housing need with low-rise housing through greenfield development and the 15% remainder in high-rise development. But again, greenfield development is not sustainable in the long run, and people will just simply choose to travel longer distances if only high-rise is made available. So BuildingIN gets us low-rise, multi-unit housing at scale in existing neighborhoods. And we do know that if most people could, they would choose to live in walkable and transit-served communities with tree-lined streets. And BuildingIN will result in complete communities that are walkable, transit-serviced, fiscally sustainable, with lower per capita emissions. So, what's standing in the way, you ask? Well, nothing really. We're like ready and excited to talk to cities about how we can help them to meet their housing targets. And that's what this launch is about. So I'm going to turn it over to Rosalind to take you through the program in more detail.
All right, thank you, Catherine. And thanks to everybody for coming. We're just very excited to share the information that we've gathered together and the program that we've assembled. So let's start with my clicker working.
It's always the clicker.
Hang on. There we go. So we start with low-rise housing. We know, as Catherine pointed out, that 85% of Canadians live in low-rise housing. Most of us in neighborhoods, on neighborhood streets. And studies have shown that the majority of that group also, if given the choice, would choose to live in neighborhoods where they can walk to get to their daily needs, where there is transit and other services available to them. This is a graph of our housing starts. It shows, it tells a sad picture because you can see in green up at the top the demand line. What we're looking for here is a shift in housing supply patterns that is really dramatic. We're not looking for fine-tuning or minor improvements. We need a really significant change. So let's start by asking some fundamental questions about how to attack this problem. What is the most affordable kind of housing that we can build? And the answer is simple wood frame housing, housing that can be repeated over and over again, and low-rise. Low-rise is the most affordable housing to build. And next question is, what's the most affordable housing to heat, cool, and maintain? And the answer is multi-unit housing. Next, what's the most affordable pattern of growth for cities? And the answer is infill growth. So growth in existing service neighborhoods and growth that brings those neighborhoods up to a level of transit supportive densities. What's the fastest way to build a lot of new housing? Well, repetition, repetition, repetition for sure, but also modular construction, flat pack modular, volumetric modular, and building smaller units. So we need units of all different sizes and different bedroom counts, but we can design them to be efficient and tight and small. And my last question, how can we build infill with the least disruption to the neighborhoods in which it's being inserted? And the questions overlap, the answers overlap here. So repeatable, because it can be built faster, and different variations on modular construction that can reduce construction times, cutting them in half, and smaller dwelling units. Also, we can have more housing faster with less disruption in neighborhoods. So this is BuildingIN, housing that is built of simple wood frame construction. It's repeatable, low-rise, multi-unit, in existing neighborhoods, bringing them up to transit supportive densities, applying all forms of construction, including conventional, but also modular, flat pack, and many smaller units, so higher density projects. Low-rise infill that works at scale, and efficient designs that are just worth repeating. So in the spectrum of housing choice, BuildingIN lines up here. So more dense than our solutions right now in the low-rise category, with higher densities than we can achieve with the new fourplex permissions that are seen in many cities across Canada right now. But well within that low-rise range where people feel a part of their neighborhood street. So now I'm just going to speak a little bit to my team and thank you to everyone who has worked to bring this program together. On our team, we have architects and designers, we have planners, planning researchers, economists, forestry, emissions specialists, housing specialists, engineers, and specialists in international design and planning. And the importance of that diversity of our team is because housing is a complex problem, and the barriers to housing are so numerous. Eliminating some of them isn't good enough. We really need to address all the barriers to housing. So, from an architectural perspective, many of the members of my team have been working with me for many years, designing buildings like this. So, infill housing, everything from singles to apartment buildings. And on the planning side of my practice, we've been working to get approvals for varieties of housing projects, and it's a rough road. We've done it all. So minor variances, severances, planning, site plan approvals, and rezonings, LPAT and OLT. Every day is a new adventure trying to get housing projects approved. The other expertise in this part of my office is development analysis. So we work with our builder clients who often have found a piece of property, and they need to figure out what would it be best to build on that piece of property. So what would be the highest and best use, or the smartest development approach to take? And we go through this complex analysis, taking into account all of the planning that relates to that property, all of the dimensional constraints, construction constraints, etc., in order to come up with a project that will be the best choice for them. And this expertise is obviously an expertise I share with hundreds of people across Canada, but it is the key or the opening to something different in the way that we address our housing challenge, because it allows us to see the best choice the developer could make for any given property. And then we've taken this thinking a step further at our office. We expanded our services to include GIS services, and we are able to map out the cumulative effect of those choices that developers make so that we can now simulate over geographic areas the anticipated infill that a municipality could expect to see. We can test different scenarios. And this is a really valuable tool for municipalities. There is no need for a municipality to implement new regulatory ideas or investment structures and be surprised by the outcome, because we can simulate the outcome and see what the impact will be on housing starts, what types of housing will be built where, and that facilitates a kind of planning with real information so that investments in neighborhoods can be strategic. So we were very pleased at the latest CMHC Housing Supply Challenge because it was an opportunity for us to submit. We have become semi-finalists in their program, and it's allowed us to gather together the pieces that we've been working on with respect to housing supply, bring together a larger team, and put together a program that is going to change the way that municipalities can approach their housing challenge. So if we look at this problem from the perspective of my architectural infill housing practice, this is a good example. A group of infill builders like this, representing our clients' groups, might build a development like this. This is one of our designs. It's a 3-door row. In one construction season, a group of this group of infill builders could build about 3 of these projects, 3 custom projects. Based on the regulations, even including 4-unit permissions, we would likely design for them 3 custom projects with fairly large units and a real focus on parking, because most of our neighborhoods are really still very car dependent. With this kind of housing solution, one project at a time, we can expect to improve our housing starts just a little bit, not nearly enough, even with our 4-unit permissions. BuildingIN can get us up to that supply line that we need. So how does that work for a team of infill developers? Well, this group of people could be working on a BuildingIN project, and they could, in one construction season, oversee 6 construction sites, because they could use modular and flat pack assembly pieces in order to increase their productivity, and each one of those sites could support many more units, so that their capacity to produce housing would increase by 5 or 6 times in each construction season. Let's just look at that in street perspective. This is a street, a Canadian street. This is the kind of thing we're designing now. So homes that are larger, targeting a more luxury client with a real focus on parking. And this is what we would like to be designing, and what we're designing with BuildingIN. This is a multi-unit building with much higher density, with animated street facade, nice porches. It's a real people-focused activity, and the site is being used for housing, not primarily for parking. Parking is being provided in this context within the neighborhood. So now I'm going to skip a little bit to the end, talk about our housing catalog. There's lots of talk about housing catalogs, and we have one too. There are a number of reasons for this. First reason being that in order to explain our BuildingIN program, we need to give a clear idea of what the outcome would be. So we're providing examples. We've got this on our website online, and we'll be adding to it every couple of weeks over the coming few months until we've filled it out. We have been working with modular and conventional builders and designers across Canada to make sure that our designs are really very well suited to being repeated, to being produced in factories. And we want to make sure that the end product is a very effective and repeatable solution for housing. And in order to design the whole of our program with all of its constituent pieces, we need to make sure it all fits together. So we need to have our designs very tight. So that's one of the important roles of the catalog. Also, when the program it is rolled out in any of our municipalities across Canada, we want builders in that location and modular factories nearby to gear up very quickly and to get shovels in the ground fast. So we will be providing them with permit-ready drawings, so that as soon as the right approvals and investment strategies are in place, they can get building quickly. All of our designs focus on modular pieces or repeatable pieces that can be assembled differently for different lot sizes and different context scenarios. And this shows you how they fit in the context of a neighborhood street, fitting in with the scale and the mix and architecture of the street. All right, so then the biggest question, why aren't we already doing this? And of course the answer is, well, there's a lot of barriers. Everyone's talking about the barriers to housing. I've got a short list of barriers here. The actual list of barriers would bore you to death, so I shortened the list down, and we can talk about just these ones. Even if we push through all of these barriers right now, the output still remains semis and multiplexes in spite of the 4-unit permissions, because those remain the solid business models. But let me speak to this little list of barriers. Building code interpretations. Across Canadian municipalities, though building codes are quite similar and often identical, the interpretation of building codes varies from municipality to municipality, and sometimes even from desk to desk within a municipality, so that builders aren't able to prepare a set of drawings for a replicable product and confidently go in and get building permits every time. The second one, stormwater management. As there are increasing amounts of extreme weather events, we are all becoming more conscious of the need for stormwater management. Many municipalities are imposing stormwater management requirements on every development project, and for these smaller infill projects, that becomes prohibitive. It's costly and slows things down really significantly. Fire flow recommendations, similarly, all of these things are quite important, right? We can't eliminate them. They're life safety and life quality issues, but fire flow also is cost prohibitive and time consuming. Then we have zoning requirements, which over the years have become have come to foster custom design solutions, whereas what we need are repeatable solutions. Also, zoning bylaws are very, very complex as well, so it can be difficult to get anything through as of right. Parking needs are a big one, a big barrier. Even in municipalities where parking isn't a requirement, it is a requirement for the business model to move ahead. And so parking becomes a barrier to the kinds of development that would meet our housing targets. And lastly, neighborhood upgrades. So some neighborhood upgrade issues are infrastructural, housing can't be built without upgrades. And other neighborhood upgrades are sort of qualitative. It's difficult for developers to invest in neighborhoods that are not really looking that great. So there are those two different aspects of neighborhood upgrades. And we need to get to a place where we're not throwing out all of those kinds of regulations, and obviously we've got to work with the context we have, but we need to be able to move smoothly through and just have drawings we can take in and get building permits for. So how do we do that? BuildingIN is unique in the way that we address barriers. We recognize that many of the barriers are actually really important things. We can't just brush them aside. We begin with a real clear solution for our multi-unit low-rise designs and a very clear geographic extent in which they would be appropriate. So when we run our program in any municipality, we will begin with a mapping methodology where we isolate the areas within the city that would be ideal for the BuildingIN business models, but also where it would be appropriate for the city. So we have clear and defined design solutions in clearly defined locations. And that is the clue to dealing with these and other barriers. When we know exactly where housing will go and we can simulate the outcome and find out just how much density to anticipate, we can eliminate some of the challenges off the list because we can understand the impact through our simulation, and we can find area-wide solutions that are much more affordable and efficient. When we have a really clear sense of our design outcomes, we can work to find code interpretations that are consistent because we're not dealing with the whole code, just the pieces that apply to our very specific design solutions. With complex zoning, we can parse out the pieces of our complicated zoning bylaws and apply just the parts that are important to this business model. So it means we're not throwing away the zoning. Zoning has the results of endless hours of work and it needs to remain, but for the purposes of BuildingIN housing types, we can apply the pieces of the zoning that are most important in order for them to move ahead smoothly. And for parking needs, instead of having to deal with parking needs across the entire city that we're working in, we have a very specific geographic extent to our intervention. And so we can look for parking solutions just in those neighborhoods, and specifically in each of those areas, understand what neighborhood parking solution would be appropriate. In some neighborhoods, permit street parking might be appropriate. In other neighborhoods, neighborhood parking lots might be appropriate. In another location, parkade might be the most appropriate solution. And when it comes to neighborhood upgrades, when we know where to anticipate housing, we can plan our upgrades dedicated to support that housing need. And we can anticipate the tax revenues that will come from that increased housing so that in the end, the upgrades will pay for themselves. So we're offering municipalities a comprehensive program, set of tools, and for the builders and developers in and around any of the municipalities that work with us, we're offering permit-ready drawings in the form of a catalog. If all growing municipalities across Canada implemented the BuildingIN program, the land available for infill development would exceed housing need. And that would curb housing cost escalation and land cost escalation. There is an enormous potential here to improve our neighborhoods and to meet our housing targets.
Thank you. Well, I'm not going to lower this because I'm going to have Steve come up, and then I'll lower it later when I come back. Steve Pomeroy.
I'll lower it down later for you there, Catherine, no worries. I'm just going to make a couple of comments about the program, which I think is a really interesting and innovative approach to meeting the challenge that we all know about, increasing supply. And as Rosalind has indicated, it's very much focused on getting the planning process right, getting the approvals process right, working with neighbours and consumers, and also working with industry and builders. But I think we've all heard the biggest constraint that we have to achieving increased supply outcomes is labour constraints and to some extent financing constraints in the system. So I think overlaying, as much as the BuildingIN initiative is trying to create and facilitate industry, particularly through the modular type of development, to actually scale up in this way. Scaling up modular and manufactured housing is a huge challenge for us. And the federal government, through the Housing Accelerator Fund, has invested significantly for $4 billion, and the next another $400 million, I guess, in the budget, to facilitate improving in the planning process. But we can plan all we want. It's the implementation that we have to actually get right, and we have to be able to implement at scale. To do that, we have to really scale up the modular industry, and in order to do that, if we think about the Rapid Housing Initiative that the federal government announced in 2019, it's a one-year initiative, 3,000 units, and spread across 15 municipalities, and then an unallocated portion. We didn't really get much take-up on the modular. It was very, very slow and difficult to do. If the federal government had said, we want to mass produce, we want to mass procure 3,000 or 5,000 units, and we're going to do it every year for the next 5 or 10 years, the modular industry would have had the incentive to scale up their factories, to really get to scale. So I think we need to take the concept that we're using in the Housing Accelerator Fund to scaling up the approvals process to scaling up the industry. And I think there's a real sort of call out to government here to actually put their money where their mouth is. And in the same way that we're investing in battery plants and EV factories in different parts of the country and the province as part of economic development, a very significant part of economic development in this area, in the housing area, and improved housing productivity and overall economic productivity would be for the federal government to underwrite and procure at scale to facilitate municipalities and the builders that want to invest and build in those communities to do this type of thing. So I think it's critical. The way this program could be really successful is to basically bring all the pieces together that Rosalind's outlined, but also to augment that with serious federal investment that would actually help us scale up that industry and really get to a significant scale without which we're not going to meet our growing population and household needs, leaving aside any issues of affordability, which we can talk about later. Thank you.
Okay, well, welcome to, I see a few people arrived after we started, so welcome. I'll facilitate any questions if I have one over here.
I'm really glad to see that you have streetscapes that are not dominated by parking. And I'm glad to see the amount of green space and the front porches, which provide kind of a third space, a sort of a semi-public aspect to a street, and causes neighbors to talk to neighbors. So, but I'm wondering one thing. Are you proposing these as individual units sold in some sort of condo style, or would they be rentals?
Okay, I'll let, so just, the question was, do we, because we're online, I'm going to repeat the questions. Yeah, so so with the streetscape that is being proposed here, with the upgrades to the neighborhood and the parking not on site, that's an important aspect of this, but also, do we anticipate having these units mostly as rentals or ownership? So I'm going to let Rosalind respond to that.
Okay, so it will vary quite a bit across the country. In BC, there's more potential for strata or condo ownership, whereas in the rest of the country, that kind of structure is limited. And so it's more, there will be a mix across the country. Some will be rental ownerships and some will be freehold, some will be condo. Depends on the orientation and the possibilities in that area.
Because it's complicated to maintain a multi-unit dwelling. Thank you.
Thanks for that.
I could speak a little bit to the streetscaping thing.
Absolutely.
So the issue is the inclusion of some of those streetscaping features on the architectural designs that I'm showing. All of our designs and the regulations that we would be including in the overlay package with BuildingIN would require those animated spaces on facades. And the reason for that is because we're not providing one-for-one parking, we anticipate that the residents in these buildings will be walking in the neighborhood, at least to get to their car, if not having a car as the neighborhood becomes more interesting to walk in. And it's important that the street is interesting to walk along, and nothing is more interesting than seeing porches and people out on porches and facades that are animated with windows and doors and features. So that is an important part of our strategy.
Thanks. We had a question from Jason Berghoff from the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association.
Thanks so much for the introduction.
You're welcome.
Okay, so as I understand it, the municipalities are kind of the main client. How do you see that relationship working? Is it like a contract for a definitive amount of time or a deliverable? Is it a subscription model with so many kind of things like this kind of go? How do you see that portion working out?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to repeat the question, Jason is asking about the delivery to municipalities, whether it's a set package or subscription. So we are proposing it as a set package with a fixed price, and it's obviously depends on the size of the municipality, but we're aware that many municipalities might want to try out some of our tools before they step into the full program. And so we're providing much of the pieces of our program as separate tools so that municipalities can try us out and see how it goes. A lot of those tools are on their own quite valuable, particularly some of the simulation. Yeah.
And you can check out that on buildingin.ca, those tools and services, under tools. Carolyn Weitzman, housing expert and friend.
Those are beautiful illustrations of 3 different kinds of 2-story fourplexes. What difference do you think it would make to affordability and choice if it also included up to 4-story apartments with balconies, such as the one that I lived in as a student these many years ago?
So the question was, what difference would it make if this went from 2 stories to 4 stories?
Okay, also embedded in the question was the suggestion that these are 4-unit buildings, when in fact these are 9-unit buildings. So these, and they can be produced in a variety of ways, so they can be as much as 12 units. But they are the size of many 4-unit buildings, right? So many smaller units, more efficiently designed, and rather than space being taken up for garages, space is for living. And all of our designs are fitting within 2 and 3 stories because we want mass uptake of this program. And we know that it's really important when people think about change in their neighborhood to have change that is absolutely making their neighborhood better in every way. Houses that fit right in, that add density, the opportunity for investments in missing pieces in their neighborhood or run-down aspects of their neighborhood. And because we can meet our housing targets really easily at 2 and 3 stories, there's no need to press people's buttons and go to 4.
Catherine LeBlanc?
And how will this help cities finance any type of improvements or transit or any type of things that they may need?
Maybe I can take a shot at that since that was part of my past life.
Can you repeat the question?
So the question was, how does this help cities to finance the things that they need, the services that they need? So when we're building into existing neighborhoods, first off, we're not building out, we're not servicing, further and further away from existing services, but we're also increasing the density in 2 and 3 stories. So you do have an increase in, property tax revenue and other revenues that are available today, especially with some of the federal funding that's available. And that really needs to happen in parallel with investments in those neighborhoods so that they do become more walkable and better transit served. All of these neighborhoods that would qualify would have to be, at the very least, transit serviceable, but we want them to be well served by transit and walkable and cyclable and real complete communities.
And just to follow up on that as well, so our simulation is really key to all of this. So when we talk to city councilors about investing in neighborhoods, they get pretty wary pretty fast, right? But with simulation, if we can be clear about the amount of housing that we anticipate and the geographic area in which we anticipate and own over the period of time that it's going to be arriving to that area, it makes decisions about investment very different because you can be clear about the return on your investment, the return in terms of tax revenue from those homes as they are built. And then there's also the potential for investment from higher levels of government once you can be clear how you're going to meet your housing targets.
I think there was a question at the back. Yes.
Councillor Kenneth, so nice to see you again at the microphone, I must say.
Thank you.
I'm just amazed at this myself. It's just so long we've been chasing the missing middle in Ottawa. I actually could see trees surviving in your design as somebody who's been a community advocate for green space for some time. But I have 2 other questions that come to mind. The first is, in the models you talked about, and I appreciate there are many more to come. I saw a lot of empty squares. You had your walkway towns and some empty squares. Have you thought of integration insofar as commercial and residential? So I spin this off of the 15-minute neighborhood, and we have a lot of older neighborhoods in Ottawa, and I'm sure across the country, I can only guess. But in Ottawa, where we talk about 15 minutes, except we're not quite there because there is a distance lag, where if you were to design a site like this with some residential component, could you put some reasonable commercial infrastructure tied to it? Have you thought through that? And the second piece of my question, I'm getting older. I'm worried that my knees aren't going to make it another 15 years up my stairs. Are you seeing horizontal modules in this that would affirm elderly housing? Let me clarify that, elderly independent housing.
So the question twofold. One was, as we're building 15-minute neighborhoods where people will want to walk and stay within their neighborhoods, is there an opportunity in the designs to incorporate some commercial aspect in that? So certainly we will respond to that. And the second question was about housing that is, better designed for people, seniors and others who, like the one level surfaced and easy to access into their unit. So,
Okay.
Over to Rosalind.
Sorry, on the access question, could you also address how we get our bicycles in there safely to store? Because I can't take bicycles up 8 steps.
Okay, I'm going to start with the accessibility one first.
Okay.
So yes, many of our designs will have elevators and will be on flat apartment flats rather than with many stairs. The sweet spot for that development strategy is on slightly wider lots. And so as you see our catalog fill out the wider lots, you'll see more of those designs appearing. And with the
Commercial.
question? The commercial.
Yeah.
Right, the commercial question, and thank you so much for asking that, because there's only so much we could fit into our presentations. But yes, we have put quite a lot of thought into that transition. As a neighborhood becomes more intense and there are more people living there, there is the potential for, or there will be the need for more commercial facilities. And we want those commercial facilities to not be car-centric, not to be the kinds of places where there's a vast parking lot that you walk across to get to the building beyond, but places that are great to walk to, because it all works together as a bit of an ecosystem here. As we're providing housing that doesn't have on-site parking, we have more people on foot. It's an opportunity to make those neighborhoods slowly into much more walkable and complete communities. And so we will be challenging the municipalities that we work within to put limits on some of the car-centric aspects of their development patterns and encourage commercial facilities that are more walkable. So some of our catalog designs will include commercial ground floor spaces, and you'll see those as they come online.
Another question, wait.
Me?
Yeah, there, and then up here.
I really appreciate the previous couple of questions. I appreciate the whole presentation, but I just want to add on to that because it's not only the attention to the commercial factor, which makes a neighborhood, but something that some experts call social infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And this is already a need that's not being met in existing neighborhoods where infill would be ideal, but it already is missing social infrastructure, and the need for that will increase with the more housing. And so I would really like to challenge you to build in the social infrastructure as a specific concern side by side with the commercial amenities and the other things that need to go in this complete neighborhood.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when we talk about the, modeling those fiscal outcomes and building those complete communities, we have to, and that will be part of it. And every city will have, and every community will have different needs. But, if you think about libraries and say, I think it's River Ward in this city, there's not a library. Community centers, the types of things, and green space, of course, and the types of things, of course, that provide that social infrastructure.
And even as a beginning in that direction, to have some level of community gathering space that's not always outside, for example. If that could perhaps be part of your plans as well in some smaller scale, where there's that beginning of community hub kind of setup.
Yeah, excellent suggestions about community and community dynamics, social dynamics. So one of our team members, Karen Lindqvist, is an architect and planner from Copenhagen, and she brings this kind of social expertise to the team. We're taking this into consideration in our designs, but also in the way that we formulate regulations that would inform designs beyond our catalog, to make sure that the exterior spaces around buildings are great places for casual social interaction and don't shut down the social dynamic of the neighborhood context. But also, we see that many of our designs, as they're coming together, and this one being an example actually, are well suited to other styles of living. Well suited to including community space that can take the place of a unit that is at a high traffic place in the development. For first people's groups living together in a building, it's appropriate also for co-housing groups. So there's lots of opportunity for some of those indoor spaces to be sort of naturally occurring. We don't even need to design some of our catalog items differently in order to support that.
Thank you. Lisa Kerr with the Community Housing Transformation Center.
Well done.
Thank you.
And a board member of the Ottawa Community Land Trust.
And a board member of the Ottawa Community Land Trust.
Segued from Copenhagen, which is perfect, into not so much design, but in your plans. First of all, commendment. Totally commend you on the partnership and the diversity of partners in this. I think it is a role model for communities across the country where I assume you intend to ship it everywhere, which is fabulous.
Yeah.
any plans for maybe partnerships with community housing organizations or community-controlled assets?
Yeah, great question, Lisa. And you know, obviously, alongside the whole supply discourse, there is the discourse about just supply by itself won't create affordability, and that is a critical requirement in our society across all of our cities. So we would expect, in first instance, having smaller units there's a degree of relative more affordability compared to your big 3,000 square foot semis, which is what we're doing currently. But also the opportunity to partner with community organizations, CADCO, CCOC, and other non-profits in all of the cities across the country. Stefan's here at OCH, probably thinks bigger than this, but certainly the community housing organizations as well. So where there are opportunities to acquire existing lots and infill with an income mix and a more affordable mix in there, the opportunity will be there, and as part of the work we'll be trying to engage with that sector as well to see to what extent they want to buy into it. Sure.
So we probably have time for a couple more questions. I just want to take the opportunity, though, just to note that we have City Councillor here, Sean Devine from Ottawa. Do we have another City Councillor anywhere? No? City Councillors in the room? I know we have a few online. And we have representative from Ariel Troster's office. And Joel Harden, I believe, our MPP is here. So thank you all for joining us. So we had two more questions. I saw two hands go up, so I'm going to over to Eileen Leo from the Ottawa Mission, and then another question here.
Thank you to BuildingIN. It sounds like a wonderful initiative, and I hope you can maximize it as quickly as possible. It's desperately needed, so I applaud you, and I look forward to seeing it roll out. It relates to the previous two questions. And you mentioned yourself, Steve, that supply is just part of the issue. Affordability, of course, is another aspect. And I mean, I see people where I work all the time at the shelter, and they are in fact working. But of course, with rents at over $2,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment, they can't afford it, so they still stay in a homeless shelter until they can actually build up for some last month's rent. So, and I mean, housing or homelessness now has never ever been worse. I have never seen the shelter as crowded as it is, and I'm sure the Ottawa Mission is not the only one. So having said that, in terms of the units that have, let's say, 9 separate units, going from 4 to 9, is there within your math for how this is scaled up that at least 1 or 2 of those units, you could make the argument to a city planner or a zoning planner that at least 1 or 2 of those larger modular builds could be reserved for deeply affordable, i.e. someone who makes less than $20,000 a year, less than $30,000 a year, etc. So it's not just the missing middle, it's people who truly cannot afford current models and actually live in homeless shelters.
It's conceivable that could be done. Having said that, I mean, I think for folks who have low income and they face affordability issues, we know historically in the social housing space that when we set rents extremely low to make units very affordable, we make assets unviable. And it's very, very difficult to build them because the costs are what they are. And I think if we do want to target assistance to folks in need, and indeed, I did some work with the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness on a homeless prevention housing benefit, I think we're better to target our limited dollars to those who really need it. So if we can build the units at a modest rent level, whether it's with a non-profit or with a private developer, and then someone who can't afford that rent, 1 or 2 of the units would be eligible for access to a housing benefit. I think that then makes sure that the assistance is being directed, and if that person leaves, then the unit just goes to market, or if there's somebody else comes in that's low income, they will be eligible for it as well. So I think it's sort of mixing those policy instruments. I think this is a platform that allows that to happen.
Thank you.
And of course, there's always, I'll just add to that, there's always a potential for nonprofit to build this type of housing, right? Like, this is in existing neighborhoods. It can be built quickly. It's repeatable. It's great housing. So there is always that potential. Yeah. So one last question.
Hi, my name is Rob. I work at the Canadian Wood Council just down the road. This question's for Boston. Of course, the Canadian Wood Council also agrees that We need affordable, resilient, energy-efficient homes. You've mentioned, Roslyn, 3 stories. Is that to keep it within the affordable range of Part 9 type prescriptive houses?
Well, our work has begun with identifying the need for low-rise and the capacity of our older low-rise neighborhoods to receive infill. So we're focused on 2 and 3 stories because we see that as a great opportunity. We can build an awful lot of housing into those existing older low-rise neighborhoods, and we can have it fitting right in contextually at 2 and 3 stories. So there's nothing wrong with going higher, but that's not what our program is about.
So thank you, everyone. I know, we say, build the housing and they'll come. Sometimes, though, if you have a press conference about housing, you're not sure if they will. But it's really nice to see so many people here and interested. And we're so excited about this. We feel now like we're on our way. We've been, thinking about this and talking about this and planning this, and now we're ready to go. So thank you so much for coming. There's lunch at the back. Well, lunch. Don't want to raise your expectations too much, but there's sandwiches and stuff at the back. Do eat. And thank you, everyone, for coming. Really appreciate it. Thanks.